My name is Maya, 27, a dedicated nurse, who still lives at home in Michigan to save for nurse practitioner school. I always thought my family was close, despite my parents clearly favoring my brother Jake. Growing up, I accepted it, making the best of things. That all changed 3 months ago when Jake announced his girlfriend Amber was pregnant. My traditionally conservative parents were ecstatic. Then came the bombshell. My mum cornered me after dinner. Jake and Amber need my bedroom for the baby. I was being moved to the unfinished garage. Before I tell you how my life was turned upside down, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Grand Rapids. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Dad worked as an accountant at a local firm, Mum taught 3rd grade at the elementary school, and Jake and I were just 14 months apart. But inside those walls, the dynamics were always crystal clear. Jake could do no wrong. I was never quite good enough. When Jake brought home B- grades, my parents celebrated with ice cream. When I earned straight A's, they simply nodded and said, "That's expected." When Jake made the junior varsity basketball team, my parents attended every game cheering loudly. When I was selected for the competitive regional choir, they often missed performances due to scheduling conflicts. This pattern continued through high school and beyond. Jake received a used car for his 16th birthday. I got driving lessons and permission to occasionally borrow Mum's car if I paid for gas. Jake had a lavish graduation party with extended family and friends. Mine was a simple dinner with just the 4 of us because we just had a big party last year for Jake. The most glaring disparity came when we both headed to college. Despite my superior grades and clear career goals, my parents informed me they had limited college funds because tuition keeps going up. They could cover half my expenses if I stayed in state. I would need to work and take out loans for the rest. Meanwhile, Jake received a full ride to his first choice university 3 states away. When I questioned this, my mother said, "Yes, your brother needs more support to succeed. You've always been independent." I swallowed my hurt and worked 30-hour weeks as a nursing assistant while maintaining a full course load and Dean's List status. After graduation, I secured a position at St. Mary's Hospital in the intensive care unit. The hours were grueling, but the work fulfilled me. While many of my colleagues moved into apartments with roommates, I made the practical decision to continue living at home. My parents agreed to a reduced rent that was still beneficial to them, but allowed me to aggressively save for graduate school. My dream of becoming a nurse practitioner kept me motivated through night shifts and family tensions. Jake's post-college journey looked quite different. He dropped out after 2.5 years, claiming the university environment wasn't conducive to his learning style. He moved back home and cycled through various jobs: retail, restaurant management, inside sales. Nothing lasted more than 8 months. Each departure was never his fault. The boss was unreasonable. The company was mismanaged. His talents weren't recognized. Despite his chronic underemployment, my parents never suggested Jake pay rent. "He's trying to find himself," my father would explain. I bit my tongue, continuing to pay my share, while watching Jake spend his paychecks on gaming systems, weekend trips, and his revolving door of girlfriends. Amber entered the picture last November. 23 to Jake's 26, she worked at the mall selling cosmetics. Pretty in a conventional way, with long blonde hair and carefully applied makeup, she laughed at all Jake's jokes and knew exactly how to compliment my mother's cooking and my father's advice. From their first meeting, my parents were charmed. I was genuinely surprised when Jake gathered us in the living room one Sunday evening in February to announce Amber was 12 weeks pregnant. Given my parents' traditional values and frequent lectures about proper order of things, and waiting for marriage, I expected at least mild disapproval. Instead, my mother actually clapped her hands, and my father clapped Jake on the back. "We're going to be grandparents," my mother exclaimed, while my father told Jake how proud he was of him, stepping up to responsibility. The contrast to their reaction when my college roommate got pregnant and chose to continue her education while raising her child was stark. They had called her irresponsible and warned me not to end up like that. The pregnancy announcement shifted something fundamental in our household. Suddenly, every conversation revolved around the baby. My parents spoke of nothing else. Jake strutted around with newfound importance. Plans for converting the spare room into a nursery dominated dinner discussions. It was during one such dinner 2 weeks after the announcement that my mother first mentioned temporary adjustments to the living arrangements. "Amber will be moving in next month," she announced. The baby will need a proper nursery and Jake needs to be near them both. That makes sense, I said, thinking they meant the small guest bedroom would become the nursery. My mother exchanged glances with my father. Actually, Maya, we've been thinking. Your room has the morning sun and is closest to the bathroom. It would make the perfect nursery. I put down my fork. Where would I sleep? The garage has so much potential, my mother said brightly. Your father could put up some drywall, add a space heater. It would be like a little apartment. I looked at my father, expecting him to acknowledge the absurdity, but he nodded along with my mother's words. It would just be until Amber and Jake find their own place, my mother continued. The baby needs proper space, and Amber will need a real bedroom during the difficult last months. I felt ambushed, but tried to stay calm. The garage isn't insulated. It gets below freezing in there during spring nights. We'll get you lots of blankets, Jake chimed in, as if offering a generous solution. I looked around at their expectant faces and realized they had discussed this at length without me. The decision was already made. I was being displaced for the golden child yet again, but this time literally having my space taken away. I pay rent for my bedroom, I said quietly. We can adjust your rent accordingly, my father offered, as if this made it reasonable. Looking back, I should have refused then and there, but a lifetime of accommodation is a hard habit to break. I reluctantly agreed to what I believed would be a short-term sacrifice for family harmony. The garage transformation began the following weekend. While my parents took Jake and Amber shopping for nursery furniture, I was left alone to clear out years of accumulated storage. Dusty holiday decorations, camping equipment used once and abandoned, exercise machines purchased with January resolutions and forgotten by February, boxes of Jake's childhood memorabilia preserved with care, while mine had mysteriously disappeared years ago during a necessary purge. The concrete floor was stained with old motor oil and the walls were unfinished, exposing insulation in some places and bare studs in others. A single bare bulb provided harsh overhead lighting that left corners in shadow. The garage door, designed for cars rather than human habitation, had visible gaps around the edges where drafts would inevitably penetrate. My father spent one Saturday morning installing drywall on one wall and declared the space livable. He added a second-hand space heater and a folding screen for privacy. My mother contributed an area rug that didn't quite cover the stained concrete and some mismatched curtains for the single small window. Meanwhile, professional painters and carpenters were hired to transform my bedroom into a picture-perfect nursery. No expense spared for the coming grandchild. I watched silently as my personal space was stripped of all traces of me, then reborn in soft yellows and greens. The contrast to my garage accommodations couldn't have been more stark. With my nursing salary, I purchased what my parents deemed unnecessary luxuries. A proper mattress to replace the old futon they suggested. Heavy blackout curtains to create some semblance of darkness for my rotating shift schedule. A small refrigerator so I wouldn't disturb the household when coming home from night shifts. Each purchase depleted the savings I'd been accumulating for graduate school. March in Michigan brought freezing nights and snow flurries. The space heater barely took the edge off the cold, forcing me to sleep in layers of clothing and multiple blankets. On particularly cold nights, my breath formed visible clouds in the air. I began taking extra shifts at the hospital, partly for the additional income, but mostly to avoid my increasingly uncomfortable living situation. The bathroom became another point of contention. My parents' house had 2 bathrooms, the main one upstairs and a half bath on the main floor. I had been using the main bathroom, but with Amber moving in, I was now expected to use only the half bath. This meant no shower access in the early morning or late evening when Amber might be preparing for her day or winding down. She's pregnant, Maya. She needs the bathroom more than you, my mother explained when I raised concerns about shower schedules conflicting with my work hours. I suggested installing a simple shower in the garage, since the water lines were already accessible. My father dismissed the idea as too expensive, despite having just spent hundreds on custom shelving for the nursery. The lack of proper insulation became a health issue. After 2 weeks of sleeping in the garage, I developed a persistent cough. When I confronted my parents about the need for proper insulation, they assured me it was just temporary and suggested I use more blankets. The definition of temporary remained conveniently vague. When I asked for a timeline, my mother would change the subject, or my father would suddenly remember an urgent task requiring his attention. As March turned to April, Amber's presence in the house expanded. Her toiletries took over the bathroom counter. Her dietary preferences dictated grocery shopping and meal planning. Her preferred television shows dominated the evening entertainment. Jake, emboldened by his new status as future father, began treating the house as his exclusive domain, leaving messes for others to clean and making noise, regardless of my sleep schedule. My co-worker Lisa was the first to notice the toll the situation was taking. After I nearly made a medication error during a particularly exhausting shift, she pulled me aside in the break room. "Maya, you look terrible. Are you sick?" Her direct approach, typical of the no-nonsense nurse she was, caught me off guard. "I'm fine," I automatically responded. "Just tired." Lisa's skeptical expression made it clear she wasn't buying it. "You've been just tired for weeks. What's going on?" Something about her genuine concern cracked my careful composure. Before I could stop myself, the whole story came pouring out. The garage, the cold, the disrupted sleep, the obvious favoritism. Lisa listened without interrupting her expression, growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine. "Maya, that's not okay. They're treating you like you don't matter." "It's temporary." I echoed my parents' words, though, with significantly less conviction. "How temporary? And even if it is, that doesn't make it acceptable. You're paying rent for inhumane conditions." I had no good answer. The truth was, I didn't know how long this would continue, and a lifetime of accepting second place made it difficult to demand better. The situation was put on public display when extended family gathered for Easter dinner. As relatives arrived, they naturally asked about the nursery preparations. My mother proudly gave tours of the transformed space that had so recently been mine, explaining the careful colour selections and special features. When my Aunt Sarah asked where I was sleeping now, my mother vaguely mentioned I had moved to a more private space, without specifying the garage. When Sarah pressed for details, my father quickly changed the subject. Later, as I helped in the kitchen, Sarah cornered me. "Your mother is being suspiciously vague about your new room. What's going on?" I considered maintaining the family fiction, but found myself too tired to pretend. "I'm in the garage." Sarah's eyes widened. "The garage in April, in Michigan." I nodded, bracing for her to defend my parents as relatives typically did. Instead, she shook her head slowly. "That sounds exactly like something your mother would do. Yeah. And your Micah, you better do. History repeats itself." Before I could ask what she meant, my mother swept into the kitchen, effectively ending our conversation with demands for serving dishes and gravy boats. As April progressed, the situation deteriorated further. Amber officially moved in, bringing with her not just clothes and personal items, but opinions on how the household should function. Despite contributing nothing financially, she began rearranging kitchen cabinets and redecorating common areas to her taste. The baby shower planning consumed the household. My mother called emergency family meetings to discuss themes, guest lists, and menu options. When I mentioned having a scheduled shift on the chosen date, I was met with exasperated sighs and accusations of not prioritizing family. "Can't you just switch with someone?" my mother demanded. "This is your future niece or nephew we're talking about." I explained that staffing was tight and requests needed to be made weeks in advance. This was met with eye rolls and whispered comments between my mother and Amber about my lack of enthusiasm. What they didn't mention was the expectation that I would contribute significantly to the shower expenses, despite being excluded from most planning decisions. The first I heard about it was when my mother handed me a bill for $300. "Your share of the catering and decorations," she explained casually. "Everyone in the family is contributing." I looked at the itemized list in disbelief. Premium catering, custom decorations, personalized favors for 30 guests. "Did Jake pay this much?" I asked. My mother's expression hardened. "Jake is focusing on saving for the baby. You know he's between jobs right now." Jake had quit his latest position at a cell phone store, claiming the manager was out to get him. He had been unemployed for over a month, with no apparent urgency to find new work. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks and sleeping in a garage. I reluctantly wrote the check, watching another chunk of my graduate school fund disappear. That night, I returned from a grueling 12-hour shift to find Amber and Jake using my mini refrigerator to store their snacks because the main refrigerator was too full with shower preparations. "We figured you wouldn't mind," Jake said casually when I discovered them rummaging through my things. It's not like you're using all the space. The refrigerator was just the beginning. Soon the garage became additional storage for their overflow. Baby gifts too large to fit in the nursery. Jake's gaming equipment when Amber decided it made the living room look cluttered. Boxes of Amber's seasonal clothing. My already limited space shrank further and my protests were dismissed as selfishness. The baby needs the space more than your books do, my mother said when I objected to my nursing textbooks being moved to make room for a baby swing that wouldn't be needed for months. The true breaking point came when I returned home to find my childhood keepsake box in the trash bin outside. The small wooden chest contained treasured mementos, including my high school graduation, tassel cards from my grandmother before she passed, and the nursing pin from my pinning ceremony. I rescued the box and confronted my mother, holding the damp container with trembling hands. "Why would you throw this away?" She barely looked up from the baby clothes she was folding. "We needed to clear space in the attic for Jake and Amber's things. You're too old for those trinkets anyway." "These aren't trinkets," I said, my voice breaking as I pulled out the now water-stained card from my grandmother. "These are my memories." My mother sighed with exaggerated patience. "Maya, we all need to make sacrifices for the baby. Jake and Amber are starting a family. That takes precedence over your sentimental attachments." That evening, Jake and Amber dominated the dinner conversation with complaints about my weird hours disrupting their sleep and how my coming and going from the garage was noisy. The fact that I tiptoed in and out while they blasted music and argued loudly at all hours was conveniently overlooked. "Maybe you could sleep at a friend's place on night shifts," Amber suggested sweetly, "just so we can get our rest. The doctor says stress isn't good for the baby." I looked to my parents, waiting for them to defend my right to enter my own home after working to save lives all night. Instead, my father nodded thoughtfully. "That's not an unreasonable request, Maya. Could you see if any of your nurse friends might accommodate you?" I excused myself before saying something I would regret. Back in the increasingly crowded garage, I noticed my cough had worsened and my sinuses felt perpetually congested. The spring dampness had brought with it visible mold growth on the concrete walls behind my makeshift bed. After 3 consecutive nights of broken sleep and breathing difficulties, I visited the employee health clinic at the hospital. The nurse practitioner examined me with concern. "How long have you been exposed to mold?" she asked, listening to my congested lungs. When I explained my living situation, she looked alarmed. "That environment isn't safe, especially for someone working in healthcare. You're at risk for developing serious respiratory issues." She wrote an official medical recommendation stating I needed to change living environments immediately and prescribe medications for the respiratory inflammation. I took the documentation home, hoping it would finally make my parents understand the seriousness of the situation. I waited until everyone was home before bringing up the subject. Sitting at the kitchen table, I slid the medical documentation toward my parents. "I need to talk to you about the garage," I began calmly. "I saw a doctor today. The mold is causing health problems." My father glanced at the paper without really reading it. My mother didn't even bother to look. "If there's a little dampness, open a window," she said dismissively. "Fresh air will clear it right up." "It's not just dampness," I persisted. "There's actual mold growth. The doctor says I need to change living environments immediately." Jake snorted. "Always so dramatic, Maya. It's just a little spring humidity." "It's affecting my breathing," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I could lose time at work or even my job if this gets worse." "So now you're prioritizing work over family?" my mother asked sharply. "Over your own niece or nephew?" "This isn't about priorities," I said, frustration mounting. "This is about basic health and safety." "You know what this is," Amber interjected. "It's jealousy. You can't stand that Jake and I are starting a family while you're still single." The unfairness of this accusation left me momentarily speechless. I had been nothing but supportive of their relationship despite my reservations about its stability. "I'm not jealous," I finally managed. "I'm sick, literally sick from living in unsafe conditions." "You should be grateful we let you stay at all," my mother said, with that trademark sneer I'd grown up with. "Most adults your age don't live with their parents. We could have asked you to move out completely." "I pay rent," I reminded her, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I pay for a bedroom, not a moldy garage." "There she goes, always bringing up money," Jake said, rolling his eyes at Amber. "So materialistic." "Says the person who hasn't paid rent in years," I retorted, my patience finally snapping. The argument escalated quickly from there. Jake called me selfish and dramatic. Amber tearfully claimed I was causing her pregnancy stress. My father retreated to his typical silence in the face of conflict, and my mother delivered the final blow. "If you're so unhappy here, perhaps you should find somewhere else to live." The statement hung in the air. Not a suggestion, but a challenge. The unspoken message was clear: your discomfort doesn't matter. You don't matter. I went to work the next day in a fog, physically ill and emotionally drained. During medication rounds, I found myself staring at a vial, unable to remember which patient it was for. My supervisor, Diane, noticed immediately. "Maya, are you all right? You don't seem yourself." I assured her I was fine, but later in the shift I made an uncharacteristic documentation error that Diane caught during review. She called me into her office. "I'm sending you home," she said firmly. "Whatever is going on, you need to address it. You're one of my best nurses, but today you're not safe to practice." The professional rebuke, though delivered kindly, was devastating. I had always taken pride in my work, maintaining focus regardless of personal circumstances. Now my family situation was threatening my career. When I arrived home early, the house was quiet, except for the sounds of Jake and Amber watching TV in the living room. I headed to the garage, looking forward to a rare opportunity to sleep at a normal hour. What I found stopped me in my tracks. A steady drip from the ceiling had formed a puddle directly on my bed. The water had soaked through to my mattress, and the storage containers beneath, including the one holding my expensive nursing textbooks and certification materials. Thousands of dollars of professional resources, many irreplaceable, destroyed by water damage. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the symbolism of the moment. Everything I valued, everything I worked for, was literally being allowed to disintegrate, while resources flowed freely to Jake and his new family. As I sat surrounded by my ruined possessions, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "How are things at home?" Any improvement? In that moment, something shifted inside me. I was done accommodating, done sacrificing, done accepting scraps while watching others feast. "Actually," I typed back, "I think I need to take you up on that spare room offer, just temporarily until I figure things out." Her response was immediate. "Come tonight. Doors open." I spent that evening sitting in the dripping garage, evaluating my options by the light of my phone. On one side of a notebook page, I listed reasons to stay: financial practicality, family obligation, the hope things might improve after the baby came. On the other, reasons to leave: health concerns, disrespect, financial exploitation, emotional toll. The second list grew much longer than the first. Still, years of conditioning made the thought of leaving terrifying. Was I overreacting? Being selfish? Abandoning family when they needed me? I called Aunt Sarah, something I'd never done without going through my mother first. She answered on the second ring. "Maya, is everything okay?" I explained the situation, half expecting her to advise family loyalty above all else. Instead, she sighed deeply. "Your mother did the same thing to me when we were young," she said, surprising me. "Always the favorite, always her needs above everyone else's. Our parents enabled it, just like they're enabling Jake." "I didn't know that," I said, realizing how little I knew about my mother's relationship with her sister. "She wouldn't want you to know. It doesn't fit the perfect family narrative she's created." There was a pause. "Maya, this pattern doesn't change unless someone breaks it." I stayed too long, hoping for recognition that never came. "Don't make my mistake." Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. This wasn't a temporary situation or a one-time sacrifice. This was a lifelong pattern that would continue as long as I permitted it. I made my decision. I would leave. Not dramatically or vengefully, but deliberately and finally. I developed a detailed exit strategy, giving myself 1 week to execute it. First, I secured the spare room at Lisa's apartment for 2 weeks. Next, I researched available apartments within my budget, scheduling viewings during my days off. I contacted the bank to ensure my parents had no access to my accounts. I gathered my important documents, storing them in my locker at the hospital. Each day I moved essential items to Lisa's place, careful to take only what wouldn't be immediately noticed. I calculated the rent I had paid versus the accommodations received, and wrote a formal letter terminating our rental agreement, noting the health and safety violations that legally invalidated the contract. I didn't expect to recoup any money, but I wanted the record to be clear. My plan was to leave the letter along with my garage key on the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed on my final night. No dramatic confrontation, no opportunity for emotional manipulation, a clean break on my terms. But plans rarely survive contact with reality. On my 6th day of preparations, I returned from a morning shift to find my mother in the garage, looking through my partially packed bags. "What's this?" she demanded, holding up my neatly labelled box of bathroom supplies. "Are you going somewhere?" I hadn't planned to have this conversation yet, but the moment had arrived nonetheless. "Yes, I'm moving out." Her expression shifted from surprise to affronted. Moving out, just like that, without discussing it with the family. The irony of her indignation after months of decisions made without my input was not lost on me. I've tried discussing my concerns for months. No one listened. "This is about the garage, isn't it? You're still upset about having to make a small sacrifice for your brother's family." "This isn't a small sacrifice," I said calmly. "This is about a pattern of being treated as less important, less valuable than Jake. The garage is just the latest example." My mother's face hardened. "So you're abandoning your family right when we need you most, with the baby coming." "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm taking care of myself because no one else in this family will." My father appeared in the doorway, drawn by our raised voices. "What's going on?" "Maya has decided she's too good for this family," my mother announced before I could speak. "She's moving out without even discussing it." My father looked genuinely confused. "But why? We're family. We stick together. Family supports each other equally," I said, finding strength in my calm certainty. "That's not what's happening here." Jake appeared behind my father, Amber, hovering at his shoulder. "What's all the yelling about?" When he heard I was leaving, his reaction was immediate and predictable. "Seriously, you're bailing right before the baby comes. That's cold, Maya, even for you." "I'm not bailing," I said. "I'm establishing boundaries." "Boundaries," Jake scoffed. "That's just selfish people talk for not helping family." "I've been helping this family my entire life," I said quietly. "I've worked since I was 16, paid my way through college, contributed rent and groceries, adjusted my schedule to accommodate everyone else's needs, and in return I get moved to a garage that's literally making me sick." "It's not that bad," Jake dismissed, and "You're being dramatic as usual." I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of the mold growth and water damage. "This is what I've been living with. Would you let Amber and the baby live in these conditions?" "That's different," my mother interjected. "They're starting a family. And I'm what, expendable, less deserving of safe housing because I'm single?" "No one said that," my father protested weakly. "You didn't have to say it. You showed it in every decision, every allocation of resources, every dismissal of my needs." Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "If you leave now, don't expect to be welcomed back. Family loyalty goes both ways." The statement, coming from someone who had known me less than 6 months, would have been laughable if it weren't so revealing of how quickly she had absorbed the family dynamic. "I'm not leaving on a whim," I said, addressing my parents rather than Amber. "This is a decision made after months of trying to make this work. I've found an apartment, I've made arrangements, I'm not asking for permission or approval." "So that's it?" my mother demanded. 27 years of family and you just walk away." "I'm not walking away from family," I corrected her. "I'm walking away from being treated as less than. There's a difference." My mother's expression turned cold. "If you leave now, don't come crying back when you realize how good you had it here." It was the final confirmation that I was making the right choice. No concern for my well-being or acknowledgement of my legitimate grievances. Just a threat designed to maintain control. I finished packing methodically while my family cycled through anger, disbelief, and attempted guilt trips. By nightfall, I had loaded my essential belongings into my car. The rest would have to wait for another day when tensions had cooled. As I placed my garage key and letter on the kitchen counter, my father made one last appeal. "Maya, please. Think about what you're doing. We're family." I looked at him directly. "Yes, we are. And that should have meant I was treated with respect and consideration. It should have meant my health and well-being mattered as much as Jake's or Amber's. It should have meant I wasn't relegated to dangerous living conditions while everyone else enjoyed comfort." "We did the best we could with what we had," he said defensively. "No," I disagreed gently. "You did what was easiest and what maintained the family hierarchy. Jake first, everyone else distant seconds. I deserve better than that. With those words, I walked out the front door and into an uncertain but self-determined future. The first night at Lisa's apartment was surreal. The quiet, the warmth, the simple luxury of a room with proper walls and insulation. I slept for 11 straight hours, waking only when sunlight streamed through actual windows with proper blinds. For the first few days, my body seemed to be catching up on weeks of sleep deficit and stress recovery. My persistent cough began to subside. The constant tension headache I had grown so accustomed to, I barely noticed it anymore, gradually released its grip. Even my appetite returned after weeks of eating minimally due to stress. My phone filled with text messages and voicemails, ranging from angry accusations to tearful pleas. My mother vacillated between telling me I was breaking her heart and warning me I would regret my selfish choices. My father's messages were fewer, but focused on reasonable discussions and family commitments. Jake alternated between calling me heartless and demanding I return specific household items he suddenly claimed were his. I responded to none of them needing the space to heal and think clearly. Aunt Sarah continued to provide perspective and support via regular phone calls, helping me understand the generational patterns at play. "Your grandmother did the same with your mother that your mother does with Jake," she explained. "The golden child who can do no wrong while everyone else scrambles for approval crumbs. Your mother resented it when it happened to her, but recreated the exact same dynamic with her own children." This insight helped me view the situation with more compassion, though it didn't excuse the behavior. Understanding the source of a wound doesn't negate the need for healing. Lisa proved to be an unexpected blessing. She gave me space when needed, but also provided practical support, from helping me compare apartment options to lending me kitchen essentials. Her straightforward nurse's perspective cut through my occasional backslides into guilt and uncertainty. "Would you let a patient live in those conditions?" she would ask when I wondered if I'd overreacted. "Would you tell a patient they should sacrifice their health for someone else's comfort? Apply the same standards to yourself that you would to those in your care." The financial reality of my situation became clearer as I searched for affordable housing. Grand Rapids' rental market was tight and my budget stretched thin by recent expenses. I found a studio apartment that met basic requirements but required nearly 60% of my monthly income, leaving little for savings or emergencies. I negotiated a modified schedule with my supervisor, Diane, explaining my situation honestly. Her response surprised me. "I wondered what was going on," she said. "Your work has always been exceptional until recently." She rearranged the schedule to give me consecutive shifts that would maximize my rest periods and minimize commute costs. "We need nurses like you. Let's make this work." The support from my workplace community extended beyond Diane. When word spread that I was setting up a new apartment from scratch, the break room filled with donations. A coffee maker from the surgical floor charge nurse, towels from the pediatric unit, a microwave from the emergency department staff. Each gift came with the same message: we take care of our own. 2 weeks after leaving my parents' house, I signed a lease on the studio apartment. It was small, just 300 square feet, but it was mine. Clean, safe, a space where I made the rules and set the priorities. The day I moved in, 6 nurses from various departments showed up with food, cleaning supplies, and willing hands. By evening, my tiny space felt like home. As I adjusted to independent living, the messages from my family gradually changed in tone. My mother's transitioned from outrage to martyrdom. "I don't know what I did to deserve such treatment," and "after all we've sacrificed for you." My father attempted reason, suggesting family counseling and mature discussion of differences. Jake mostly stopped communicating, except for occasional updates about the pregnancy, clearly designed to induce guilt about what I was missing. I maintained polite but firm boundaries, responding briefly to direct questions, but declining invitations to family events where I knew I would be outnumbered and pressured to return to the old patterns. In late May, a group text announced the birth of Jake and Amber's daughter, Sophia Grace. The message included everyone in the extended family but didn't address me directly. After consideration, I sent a simple congratulatory text and a small gift package with a note expressing good wishes for the baby. The first family gathering I missed was Sophia's homecoming celebration. My mother left a voicemail describing in detail how everyone asked about you and the family isn't complete without you. Carefully avoiding any acknowledgement of why I wasn't there. During this period of readjustment, my co-workers became an unexpected support network. Beyond the practical help with my apartment, they provided emotional ballast during difficult moments. When Mother's Day advertisements triggered unexpected grief over my fractured family relationships, the night shift crew rallied around me with impromptu dinner and distractions. When Jake posted photos of family gatherings I wasn't invited to, Lisa confiscated my phone for the evening and took me to a concert instead. Gradually, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged under family expectations and constraints. I joined a community choir, rekindling the musical passion that had been dismissed as impractical in my youth. I volunteered at a free health clinic on weekends, finding purpose in serving those with limited access to care. I began hiking local trails, finding peace in nature and movement. Most significantly, I revived my graduate school plans. With my living situation stabilized and my health improved, I began researching programs and preparing applications. The path would be challenging financially, but for the first time in years, I believed in my ability to forge my own way forward. 6 months after leaving my parents' home, my new life had taken recognizable shape. My tiny apartment, though modest, had become a sanctuary, decorated with items that reflected my preferences rather than family compromise. My health had rebounded completely, the respiratory issues resolved with proper living conditions. My work performance had returned to its previous excellence, with Diane suggesting I consider a charge nurse position. Most importantly, I had regained a sense of self-worth independent of family validation. The constant background noise of trying to earn approval had quieted, replaced by the steadier rhythm of self-respect and clear boundaries. On a crisp October afternoon, I returned from a morning shift to find Aunt Sarah waiting outside my apartment building. The unexpected sight of her filled me with momentary panic. "Is everyone okay?" I asked as I approached mine, racing through possible emergencies. "Everyone's physically fine," she assured me, "though that's actually part of why I'm here." Over coffee at my small kitchen table, Sarah shared family news I hadn't heard. Through the limited communication channels I maintained, Jake had lost another job. Amber was struggling with postpartum depression. My parents were overwhelmed by the reality of having an infant in their home well into their 60s. "Your mother would never admit it, but they're drowning," Sarah said. Jake and Amber fight constantly. Neither of them was prepared for parenthood. A complicated mix of emotions washed through me. Vindication that the rosy family picture was proving unsustainable. Concern for baby Sophia caught in the middle of adult dysfunction. And yes, a small reflexive urge to rescue, to step in and fix things, as I had done throughout my life. "Maya," Sarah said, reading my expression perfectly, "this is not your responsibility to solve. I'm not here to guilt you into going back. I just thought you should know the reality versus the perfect family fiction your mother is still trying to maintain." "I appreciate that," I said honestly, "but I don't know what, if anything, I should do with this information." Sarah smiled. "That's growth right there. The old Maya would already be packing to move back and save everyone." We discussed options. I could maintain my current distance. I could offer specific limited support while maintaining my boundaries. I could attempt a conversation about family patterns with the hope of genuine change. In the end, I decided on a measured approach. I would offer to babysit Sophia occasionally, providing Jake and Amber some respite while building a relationship with my niece. This support would come with clear boundaries on my schedule within my capacity without sacrificing my well-being or priorities. My offer, communicated through a carefully worded text to both Jake and Amber, was met with immediate acceptance. The desperation beneath their casual, "that would be great," was palpable. We arranged for me to watch Sophia the following weekend for 3 hours at my apartment, which I had baby-proofed with Lisa's help. Those 3 hours with Sophia became a turning point. Away from the family drama, my 4-month-old niece was simply a baby needing love and attention. As I rocked her and sang the lullabies my grandmother had once sung to me, I realized I could love her without being pulled back into destructive family patterns. When Jake came to pick her up, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes and the defeated slump of his shoulders. Parenthood had stripped away his golden child armor, leaving him vulnerable and uncertain. "She was perfect," I told him, transferring the sleeping baby to his arms. "She has your nose." He looked surprised at the simple kindness. "Thanks for doing this. Things have been hard." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, possibly the first time Jake had ever admitted struggling with anything. We made arrangements for another babysitting session the following week. These limited interactions gradually opened a channel for more substantive communication. After the third babysitting session, Jake lingered after Amber took Sophia to the car. "I didn't understand before," he said abruptly. "Living at home, having everything provided. I thought it was normal, but now trying to figure out bills and jobs and a crying baby." He trailed off, then met my eyes directly. "I get it now. Why you left. Why you were so angry." "I wasn't angry about you having support," I clarified. "I was angry about the double standard, that I worked so hard for basic respect while you received it automatically." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I see that now." He hesitated. "Mum and Dad talk about you a lot. They miss you." "I miss certain things too," I admitted, "but I don't miss being treated as less valuable." This conversation became the first of many small steps toward a new kind of family relationship. My mother initially resisted any suggestion that she had contributed to the family dysfunction, but my father surprised me by reaching out independently. "I failed you," he said during our first one-on-one lunch in years. I saw what was happening but took the easy way out by staying silent. "I'm sorry, Maya." His acknowledgement, though late, was healing. We began rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing, with him making efforts to understand my perspective, rather than defaulting to the familiar patterns. My mother's journey was slower and more circuitous. Her first attempts at reconciliation came with strings attached, suggesting I had overreacted, but she was willing to forgive. I maintained firm boundaries, making it clear that genuine relationship required genuine acknowledgement of past harm. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. After months of limited contact, my mother asked to meet for coffee. I agreed with some trepidation. "Sarah told me about how our mother favoured me," she said without preamble. "I never saw it that way. I thought I was just doing what was expected the way you thought you were." She twisted her napkin, uncharacteristically nervous. "I did the same thing to you and Jake, didn't I?" The question held no defensiveness, just genuine realization. "Yes," I answered simply. "You did," she nodded, eyes downcast. "I'm trying to understand how to break the pattern, for Sophia's sake, if nothing else." It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a beginning. We started having regular short coffee meetings where we gradually explored the family dynamics with increasing honesty. There were setbacks and old patterns that emerged under stress, but also genuine efforts at change. In December, I received acceptance to the nurse practitioner program at Michigan State with a partial scholarship that made the dream financially viable. When I shared the news with my parents during our tentative family rebuilding, my mother's first reaction was genuine pride, rather than the dismissal I had grown to expect. The holidays presented a natural opportunity to test our evolving family dynamics. Rather than the traditional gathering at my parents' house, where old patterns could easily reassert themselves, I suggested a neutral location. We reserved a private room at a local restaurant for Christmas Eve dinner, creating new traditions rather than trying to force healing into old containers. The gathering wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments and occasional slides into familiar friction, but there were also new possibilities. My father asked thoughtful questions about my graduate program. My mother made visible efforts to treat Jake and me with similar consideration. Jake, humbled by the realities of parenthood, showed flashes of maturity I hadn't seen before. Most significantly, I felt different within myself. I could engage with my family without abandoning my worth or compromising my boundaries. I could love them without needing their validation. I could offer support without sacrificing my well-being. In January, I returned to my childhood home for the first time since leaving specifically to help Jake and Amber move into their own apartment. The visit was brief and purposeful, focused on the task at hand, rather than reopening old wounds. As I carried boxes from my old bedroom, now a half-dismantled nursery, to the moving truck, my mother appeared in the doorway. "Sometimes I come in here and expect to see your things," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how much I took your presence for granted until you were gone." "I needed to be valued, not just tolerated," I told her. She nodded. "I understand that now. Too late maybe, but I do understand. Not too late for a different relationship going forward," I offered. Just different from what it was before. As spring approached, bringing with it my graduate program start date and the first anniversary of my departure, I reflected on the journey. The pain had been necessary. The separation had been healing. The reconnection, still tentative, was on healthier terms than would have been possible without the rupture. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't enduring mistreatment out of loyalty, but having the courage to walk away and build the life you deserve. Your worth isn't determined by those who should love you unconditionally, but don't. It's found in honoring your own needs and surrounding yourself with people who value you exactly as you are. Healing isn't a destination with a neat conclusion, but a continuing journey of small choices and growing awareness. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that was hurting you even when society said you should stay? What boundaries have you created to protect your well-being? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more conversations about family dynamics and self-worth. Your journey matters, and I'm grateful you've shared part of it with me today.